Hi, my name is Jeff Prentice. I wanted to talk about color wheels and color modes. If you do a Google image search for color wheels, you'll see a lot of results. And there's just a lot of information about color and color wheels and color theory in your text, online. What we see here are the traditional wheels pretty much being presented. If we click on some of these links, for example, we can go to Wikipedia and get the whole history of the color wheels and how we've ended up with what we call the traditional color wheel. It also talks about RGB, which is your emitted light coming from the monitor versus the reflected light coming from an object that's been printed or just an object in nature. And there's also CMYK, which we'll get to over here, which is your cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, which the printers, some printers use. If we look at the traditional color wheel here, and again, I'm just picking links here. This is a Color Matters website. You can see our traditional wheel that we've all kind of experienced since we were kids, and I think generally when discussing color with a client or an art director, unless we're talking about mixing or we're getting into the technology or we're discussing the target print technology, generally we're using this wheel to discuss color. Yellow and violet, and red and green, and blue and orange, those standard kinds of colors. And don't fall into the trap of just thinking that you have to use these colors on the outside. Remember, as you get into the center of a color wheel and start using tints, tones, and shades, those relationships change pretty radically. But this is your traditional wheel that if someone comes up and says, hey, I want to design using complementary colors, you pretty much know that they mean these colors opposite one another on the traditional wheel. Here, just a Google image or a Google search for RGB color wheels brings up a lot of information on this. What I find interesting about the RGB wheel is that some designers actually design using this, and there is a lot of discussion about this. It's a hot button issue. And in the end, it's kind of up to you to decide. The only warning I would have is that if a client comes up and says, I want a complementary color scheme, and you're using this RGB color wheel to design around, remember, these are mixing tools, they're not necessarily design tools. And if you present them with a yellow and blue complementary color scheme, they might come back and say, what are you doing? I wanted blue and orange. So just be careful when in designing. Now here's the CMYK color wheel, a bunch of the results here, and this I think is a good example of how the CMYK color wheels work for mixing. Here you can see, for example, cyan, magenta, and yellow mixed together to produce these colors. Here you can see, for example, an RGB where you have red, blue, and green mixed together to make these colors. So you can see that they're mixing tools. Your printer, when it goes to do a high volume print job, is going to have to be able to print your design using this limited amount of these limited inks. So that's why it's important to work in CMYK color, and that's why in Illustrator it defaults to CMYK color modes. Now, a word on color modes. Here we're in Photoshop, and when you go and use your color picker, which is the way, even though we're in RGB mode right now, let me go ahead and show you that. Here's your image modes, and you can see CMYK RGB up above. Outside of this screen you can see grayscale, but if you go to select a color, this little exclamation mark up here is telling you that that is not going to print using CMYK. So as you move down, you can start to see that little exclamation mark move away. So be careful when you are designing in Photoshop in RGB mode, and if you plan on doing a high volume print job, that these colors will not print in CMYK.